Good evening, students. I'm here actually to start off with the course. Actually, we had already done quite a bit of the Hamlet, and let me start off with the remaining part. Actually, we could finish in the class. Actually, suddenly the classes were all closed down due to the coronavirus outbreak all across the world and the nationwide shutdown going on at the moment. And we cannot stop actually kind of sitting like this, and we have to start off in some way or other, because already we have been told that we can actually go online and then kind of keep posting our vital videos and audios, lessons and all that to our students, so that we can actually move a little farther. We can actually lag behind. We shouldn't lag behind at the point, and hope things are going to be all right. But at the moment, actually, since we are sitting down at home and we are remaining, I hope that all my students are safe. I want to actually kind of start off my first lecture on probably Act 3, Scene 1, which actually we almost touched upon in the last, probably the last class, where actually when the last class actually was conducted in the before the vacation, before the sudden closure. I think we read that part in which actually Hamlet appeared as the very artistic person. Hamlet appeared very knowledgeable and a very artistic and a very theater activist, as a very scholar, great theater scholar, and a great directorial cognoscenti and a great connoisseur of art, and then also gave a lot of wonderful pieces of advice, wonderful suggestions as to how exactly all the actors and actresses, all the actors will eventually perform the play. They're all here, and they're performing the play, which Hamlet will eventually use. And we have already said that actually Hamlet is going to use it for his own purpose, and there is an interest. There is Hamlet's own personal theatrical interest into the fact that actually he wants to go deep into the nature of Claudius and Claudius's deep malicious and malevolent designs, and also as the play begins with who's there, and then we are also looking for, Hamlet also himself is looking for the person behind all the devastations and all the mischiefs and the disorder and indiscipline, and also the chaos and disarray, political disarray, also psychological and moral and spiritual disarray into the whole, and within the space, within the palace, and outside the Danish kingdom. So Hamlet at the point actually he's now going to talk to, and he has already talked to all the players and gave them elaborate discussions, gave them elaborate instructions as to how they would actually perform, and giving them very essential nitty-gritties as to how performance should be natural and nothing overdone and nothing exaggerated, and then everything has to be done according to nature, according to one's role, and the kind of the proportion given and assigned to the role of a particular for a particular character. Therefore, each and every character is actually doing his or her own part, his part basically, and the character is not actually doing anything outside the advice and outside the instruction given by Hamlet. So that is what we did in the last class, and I'd like to actually move a little farther, and then I would like to take you to most important part of the play, in which Hamlet has actually made a part. Hamlet has acknowledged that, and Hamlet has also given out that that he's going to actually kind of add one part to the play, that the actors, the traveling actors are going to perform for the Danes, for the king in the Danish palace. And at this point, Hamlet has also created a scene in which actually there will be a kind of a situation where the king and the queen will be in contact with each other, in conversation with each other, and then the queen will actually make a lot of vows and make a lot of protestations of love and protestations of commitments and everything. But then again, we will see that how that commitment and protestations of love and the vows and pledges of love eventually fall flat in the end, and that is what and where exactly we'll see that another scene, the scene in which the exact scene as to how almost the kind of the same scene that Hamlet was intimated by the ghost in the beginning, when he was actually told elaborately, almost in grief, by his old the ghost of his old father, and that this is exactly how he was actually murdered. And then Hamlet is going to actually create the same kind of a situation in which his father, the brother, is actually going to die in the hands of the brother, a fellow brother. So that is exactly how the play is set at the moment. And then Hamlet is actually almost all set. He has added that particular part up to the play, and then this entire play is going to be arranged. And we know that the purpose of this, like, this is the meta play, this is the play within the play, which is of extra theatrical significance, which is of extra philosophical significance at the same time, which is having its own artistic and theatrical and also its technical significance into the play, where Hamlet eventually will get to know how his his conscience is walking. At the same time, Hamlet will actually also try to catch the conscience of the king. He wants to see whether the King Claudius blenches and falls flat, and that probably behaves in an abnormal manner, seeing almost a kind of identical situation as to how he murdered his own brother, old Hamlet, and the scene which is actually played, almost the same scene enacted upon the stage. So this is exactly where, and Hamlet is also taking a very wonderful preparation. He must eventually plays the role of a commentator, running commentator. He actually kind of enjoys the fun of people sitting all around. He also sits with Ophelia. Eventually Ophelia is, and he's also retorting with Ophelia, and also kind of playing cracks and cutting jokes and cracking jokes with Ophelia, and always kind of pulling her leg and pulling the other people. And then he's asking, also we know that before the set is almost done, before everything is set, he's actually asking his friend Horatio and the other people to be on guard and to actually watch the movement and the face of King Claudius very, very serious and very minutely, so that they can read the inner conscience and the bitings of and the qualms of conscience of the king, even while the performance is on. So in one part, actually, I'd like to take you to Act 3, Scene 2, line number 125, in which Ophelia and Hamlet are, there is this entering the prologue. If I can read it out to you a little bit, that enter a king and a queen very lovingly, the queen embracing him. She kneels and makes a show of protestation unto him. As I said, that they're going to be this is called a mousetrap, has already been said, that is going to be the mousetrap for Claudius to just simply capture his bitings of conscience and capture his guilt at the same time. So he takes her up and declines his head upon the neck. He lies upon the bank of flowers. So this is exactly a very romantic situation, where the queen comes in and the king is there and makes passionate action. And the poisoner, with some 2 or 3 mutes, comes in again, seeming to condole with her. The dead body is carried away. The poisoner woos the queen with gifts. She seems harsh a while, but in the end accepts his love. This is exactly how, it's kind of it's kind of a dagger, and it's kind of this kind of the storyline, which is identical with exactly what has happened so far. Gertrude has married and falls into the trap of Claudius's witchcraft of words and all that, and his mischief and all that. And this is exactly how, with this 1.5 months or 2 months, his father did, and the hasty remarriage by Gertrude has been also pointed out over here in a very desperate way. So these are like thorns, and then I think each and every one's hair will go up in awe and in surprise and fear, and also in an utter sense of guilt. So that is exactly what we have to notice. So you can actually read it out by yourself and see exactly how it happens, because it's more about watching the part of the play. I hope that by now actually you must have watched the Mel Gibson's version of Hamlet, and then you might have seen that this particular part is actually very, very seriously done, and then much seriousness, much attention has been given to this, where Hamlet is preparing the entire show and entire mousetrap, the play within the play scene. At one point, I'd like to just read when the prologue goes, and for us and for our tragedies, about line number 130. Here, stooping to your clemency, we beg your hearing patiently. Hamlet says, is this a prologue or the posy of a ring then Ophelia says, "It is brief, my lord." When the prologue comes, it says, "It is brief, my lord." And Hamlet immediately retorts by saying, "As woman's love." It is brief, my lord, as woman's love. It's in line number 135. Still, Hamlet is, very disparate and very strong in his insinuation of Ophelia, insinuation to Ophelia, saying that actually just your love is as short-lived as the prologue scene. So the player king and the player queen come over here, and then the both of them have the conversation, and you can probably read and you see that how the player queen, so many journeys made, the sense kind of appearing very metaphysical. Both of them, the protestations of loyalty and the subject of human stability and all that. These are the matters of discussion over here, and the player queen will continue to swear allegiance to the king, and then swear by the heavens, by the Lord, by the heavens, and the everything good about the fact that she will remain constant, she will remain the only one queen even after she will die a widow rather than marry a second time. But these are all the protestations of love over brimming, the words overbrimming with love, and overwhelming words of love, eventually overwhelming words of respect and honor and sincerity. Eventually, this protestation of loyalty will eventually pave the way for her own decline, and then eventually she will stoop to trickery and untruths at the end of the day, and that is what we would see. And then Gertrude, this is something which is actually kind of place for Gertrude, so that Gertrude can see and Gertrude can understand and see this is warmhood, womanhood. And you can see that the play, this I'm not going to read it up for you, but then please look at these, the way the pledges and the promises of love and that have been made so far at the moment of this highest passionate intensity. So the queen has been actually making all these pledges and promises of love, and made at they're all made at the highest, more mental and the highest passionate intensity. Claudius's conscience is very pliant and easily overthrown by his ambition, and we will also notice that eventually when Claudius sees the last point, eventually he just as Macbeth, as we have seen, that is a Machiavellian hero, as his power and his love for power, his lust for power eventually will destroys all his sense of morality and sense of responsibility to the state of Scotland. In the same manner, I mean, this very short-lived, very momentary understanding of the momentary realization of the momentary conscience biting in Claudius is rather very pliant, and then is eventually very, very quickly overthrown by his overarching ambition for the throne, for the queen, and also for his own power. So this is something that we go on in line number 185 onwards. You go on and see what happens after that. And player queen comes in and she says again that nor art me give food, nor heaven light, sport and repose lock from me day and night. To desperation turn to trust and hope, and anchors cheer in prison be my scope. Each opposite that blanks the face of joy meet what I would have well, and it destroy both here and there. Pursue me lusting strife, if once a widow ever I be wife. So this is the final, the line number 203 and 4, and in which she says that she eventually will die a widow rather than become a wife for anybody else. But eventually that has been broken, and this is how her promise eventually will be broken. Just as Gertrude has fallen from the grace of Hamlet's highest estimation of Gertrude as a mother, as the queen of a very virtuous king and a virtuous queen of a virtuous king. Hamlet, if she should break it now, and then Hamlet is actually retorting immediately after when she says that if once a widow, if ever a widow. Hamlet says that if she should break it now, I mean, then Hamlet is asking that she's going to break it now. And player king, it's deeply sown, sweet, leave me and sleeps, player queen. And then the whole thing goes on. And let's read it a little bit from line number 215. Claudius says, what do you call the play? Hamlet says, the mousetrap. Marry how? Tropically, this play is the image of a murder done in Vienna. Gonzago is the duke's name. His wife Baptista, you shall see anon. It is a knavish piece of work, but what? Oh, that your majesty and we that have free souls, it touches us not. Let the gold jade winch, our withers are unwrung. Now this is the point actually, that he wants to see that the coolness of the face of the and the indifference and the coolness of the face of King Claudius. That is what he wants to see, and he wants to see the slow destruction of the slow decline of this sang-froid, the mental state, the very strong mental state, and the sang-froid that we call the coolness of his own face, breaking with the passage of time as the climax of the play, as the murder eventually approaches, as the murder scene approaches, exactly which is the same as the way his father was murdered by Claudius. And his crime, is now the primal elderly curse upon it, and it's a primal elder curse upon it, and then it makes Claudius betray his own guilt, and he's now ruffled. He feels mentally, spiritually ruffled for the moment, and then eventually loses his spiritual balance and his sang-froid. And then we go on to the other part, and then we see that Hamlet, and then the point of the poison in the particular scene, which actually has this poison scene, and exactly the poison scene that has been given out by the ghost, old Hamlet's ghost to Hamlet. And now the point over here is that the prince is appearing over here at this point of time, Shakespeare's own mouthpiece, and then I'd like to read a little bit from line number 235, Act 3, Scene 2. Hamlet: a poisons him in the garden for the state. His name's Gonzago. The story's extant and written in very choice very choice Italian. You shall see anon how the murderer gets the love of Gonzago's wife. The murderer eventually will get the love of Gonzago's wife, and then Gonzago is the king. Eventually is going to be murdered by the brother, and then eventually how the brother eventually will take the queen as his wife. Ophelia: the king rises. What frighted the false fire? How fares my lord? Give over the play. Give me some light. Away, lights, lights, lights. This is the point. The prince's ambition is hidden. We understand that there is, of course, definitely, we have never seen Hamlet to be very ambitious. Hamlet has never actually walked for his own throne, or never actually kind of hankered after his power, have never thought about his power. Rather, he always thought philosophically. He always thought theoretically, philosophically, spiritually, morally, and politically, the very state of goodness and the well-being of all the citizens of the state of Denmark. But at this point of time, it is very important that the destroyer has to be taken away from, and this destroyer has to be ousted from his own usury and the post that is illegitimate, and then he is the legitimate inheritance, and then eventually he proclaims his own legitimacy, and now he has got this moral legitimacy. The prince's ambition now, his ambition appears to be hidden. So far, his ambition was hidden behind the mask of disappointment and the disappointed love or unrequited love. But now at the point we understand that Hamlet is growing more mature. Hamlet is growing more and more resilient and sure of his own task that he has to take. So 3 points. To make sure there are 3 points we have to keep in mind. One is the guilt has been proved. Claudius's guilt, sense of guilt, that he's biting when he's looking for light, and light. It is biting his conscience, or the bitings of his conscience, the qualms of his conscience have been found, and then his guilt is proved at the moment, because then now Hamlet is very sure and sure of the fact that what the ghost said and what the ghost eventually gave out was a true ghost of his own father, and then there is nothing wrong, there is nothing untrue about it, and then everything has eventually come true. Second point is that the queen, the Gertrude, the queen, is freed from guilt, because she is still not quite sure about exactly what happened, what went wrong, and that she did not know as to whether her own husband was brutally murdered by this adulterate beast, Claudius, and then she's completely unaware of the fact. She was actually kind of bullied into believing the fact that actually her virtuous king, her virtuous husband, old King Hamlet eventually was, was not murdered. I mean, he died a natural death. Third point is that the ghosts, veracity of truth, and the veracity has been established. These are very important points we must keep in mind. And the next lecture in which we like to look at the point in which actually Polonius and Claudius will be in conversation with each other, because this time onwards we will see that Claudius eventually will take very quickly go into his room, to his own chamber, and then will kneel down and see himself place himself before the idol, before the image of the Jesus Christ, and he was actually kneeling for prayer. At that point of time, even Hamlet will eventually pursue him, and he had his own show. But at that point, when he was found kneeling down with prayer, with supplication and meditation, Hamlet did not murder him, did not kill him, did not avenge his father's death. So it would be another question, and then we'll discuss exactly what prompted Hamlet not to commit an act of murder in another act of crime at a moment when it is not ripe for the more virtuous prince, to the Renaissance, the humanist prince, to kill anyone at prayer, because that will eventually send him directly to the heavens. That is what was his purpose, and what was his thinking, what was his justification and judgment. So we remember that point. And Hamlet, why look you so now? And then he says that make it speak so blood you think I am easier to be played. It's actually now there is one point when Hamlet and Guildenstern, there is a conversation, and after the conversation there is a little bit of a it's not a joke, but then again something which proclaims Hamlet's complete composure. He is perfectly all right, and then he says at one point, I think it is a noticeable statement, it's a noticeable point, when Hamlet says that it's line number 334 onwards, and there is much music, excellent voice in this little organ, yet cannot you make it speak. This little organ is talking about the tongue, that the tongue speaks a lot, there's a lot of music, there's a lot of words, but then it's not easy to make Hamlet speak everything that the other people want to, like this Guildenstern and Rosencrantz. They try to make Hamlet speak about his own. We already talked about the the love theory, the unrequited love theory, and also the ambition theory, and that of the conspiracy theory, and then we understand that it's not actually about any unrequited love. So he says that do you think I'm easier to be played on than a pipe? Now he says that is it easier, I mean is it do you know that is it easier to play on me than a pipe? Do you know how to play a pipe? If you do not know how to play a pipe, if you think that it's not so easy to play a pipe and then make me play, make me speak out, call me what instrument you will, though you can fret me, you cannot play upon me. So the fret, as I said, that you can probably fret me. Fret is actually, you understand that when if you are if you're familiar with the strumming, when you have the fret of the stringed instruments, like for a guitar or any kind of stringed instruments, you have the fret on which actually you irritate, and or you actually put your fingers on in order to put the music, and you put pressure on that fret in order to put your fingers, and then use it as to measure up your musical notes and all that. So he says that you can fret me, you can actually irritate me, but you cannot make me speak, which means that he cannot play upon me. So it's not so easy for you, Gild and Ross, to play upon a person like Hamlet like this. So this is something which is important at the moment. And then entered Polonius, and Polonius has a conversation with Claudius, and then we know that at one point Polonius says that there's a small note. It's like Act 3, Scene 3, page number Act 3, Scene 3, line number 30 onwards. It is meet, and as you said, and wisely was it, is Polonius saying, it is meet that some more audience than a mother, since nature makes them partial, should overhear the speech of vantage. Fare you well, my liege, I'll call upon you ere you go to bed, and tell you what I know. So Polonius says that, thanks dear my lord, and then exit Polonius, and then Claudius speaks to himself, saying that, oh, my offense is rank, it smells to heaven. So this is a momentary, you can see that is momentary biting of conscience, or maybe he's actually kind of feeling the sense of his guilt, but then again he will betray his sense of guilt. It hath a primal eldest curse upon it. So this primal eldest curse upon it, a brother's murderer. Pray can I not, I cannot pray, he says, though inclination be set as sharp as will, my stronger guilt defeats my strong intent, and like a man to double business bound, I stand in pause where I shall first begin, and both neglect. So if you read a little bit more, and you'll see there's a very long speech by Claudius, and he eventually kneels. Last he says, "O bosom black as death." It's line number 65. What can it not? Yet what can it when one cannot repent? O wretched state! O bosom black as death! O lying soul that is struggling to be free, art more enraged. Help, angels, make essay, bow stubborn knees and heart with strings of steel. Be soft as sinews of the newborn babe, all may be well. He kneels down. Hamlet, now might I do it pat, now is a praying, and now I will do it. And so he goes to heaven, and so I am revenged. So this is what Hamlet is feeling, that now he's, it's a long conversation, a long speech by Hamlet also at the same time. Act 3, scene 3, line number 75 onwards, and then he says that if at that moment, if he kills, if he avenges his father's death and kills Claudius, he is going to be murdered eventually, and Hamlet will not be freed from his own conscience and bitings of his own conscience, because he will eventually commit another crime of murder that will not be justifiable. So because he is actually praying at the moment, because he's very close to God at the moment, and he's actually he's repenting. Who knows? He's repenting of his sins. So at a point when he's before the before his before the altar of his own judgment, before the altar of his own sin and bad deeds, he is now at a point which is saving him. He's at a point where Hamlet is unable to charge. So we see that it would be scanned, a villain kills my father, and for that his sole son does the same villain. So this is exactly what Hamlet feels. This is what his judgment is. He cannot justify this revenge. It will eventually be another murder. So he will eventually be another villain. His killing this villain will make Hamlet become another villain in the eye of justice, in the eye of the law, in the eye of law, in the eye of the Lord, in the eye of the heavens. That's why he's not actually doing that. Another thing is that you can see that Hamlet, in a series of, it goes on a little farther up to 90, line number 90, where Hamlet continues to self-reproach his inability to act. Again, Hamlet is self-railing him, self-reproach, and he's self-reproaching him, and also he's self-criticizing him in absolute damaging verbal language. Look at the words. He says that from line number 80 onwards. Why this is hire and salary. It is base and silly, not revenge. It will be base and silly. It will not be revenge. If he kills Claudius at a moment when he's actually kneeling and is praying and is putting his hands together to God. It took my father grossly full of bread, with all his crimes broad blown as flashes may. So it is heavy with him, and I am then revenged to take him in the purging of his soul. So he's actually going to be purging his soul at a point when he's actually getting his soul purged of all the sins, when he's fit and seasoned for his passage, and he will probably make a safe passageway to heaven at this moment, and then eventually he is going to be the winner, and then Hamlet might be branded a villain otherwise. Upsode, and know thou a more horrid hint, when he is drunk asleep. Now Hamlet is actually taking another, Hamlet is looking for a more ripe hour. He's looking for a more appropriate and opportune moment, and then he feels that for Claudius to be destroyed, Claudius will provide opportunities, probably will give and pave more opportunities, those opportunities which eventually will be in keeping with his personality and his habits and his customs. And that's why Hamlet says that, look at this, and again that it actually refers back to what he said, the damn wretched adulterous and adulterate beast, when he says that when he's drunk asleep or in his rage. When he's drunk asleep, remember when he says that like a Hyperion to a satyr, and all the qualities, all these qualities, and or you might say all the vices, all these characteristic flaws, that he's a flawed man. Eventually he has to be caught during his flaws, during his own characteristic moments, when actually he will show his real character of lust. He will actually kind of get into drunk, he become a drunkard, and he will actually get down to his own lustful desires and all that. So this is exactly the kind of the time Hamlet feels that actually he has to catch the man, catch Claudius, and avenge his father's death. That will be more opportunity. That will be more. It will be more appropriate than choosing him to murder at the moment when he's praying. He says that, or in the incestuous pleasure of his bed. These are two lines which are particularly important for us. It's actually line number 89 and 90. Remember, line number 89 and 90, Act 3, Scene 3, where he says, when he's drunk, asleep, or in his rage, when he's gone out of his own senses, when he's drunk, and when he's asleep, or in his incestuous, when he's actually again back to his own adulterous physical excitement and pleasures and sexual excitements and all in the bed. Again, a swearing or about some act that has to relish of salvation in it. And then it's not actually a moment when he has to catch him at a moment when there is no point and there is no possibility of salvation at all in it. So there is, then trip him that his heels may kick at heaven. And that is the point and opportune moment when he will eventually trip and pull his leg and then accomplish his duty. And that his soul may be as damned and black as hell whereto it goes. My mother stays this physic but prolongs thy sickly days. So these are important. Now enter Gertrude and Polonius, where Hamlet even eventually is informed that Hamlet, Gertrude is waiting for Hamlet to talk to him, because there's Polonius has given this information to Hamlet, and then Hamlet is going to Gertrude's bedchamber. This is actually this important scene in which we will have a long conversation, we'll have a long dialogue, and a very heated, one of the most important climactic scenes over here in Hamlet in Act 3, Scene 4, where you will see a very strong, heated, and almost you might say that is fiery, inflamed, heated conversation between Hamlet and Gertrude, in which we will again see that Gertrude had been bluffed into the witchcraft, or bluffed into believing the witchcraft of Claudius's words, rather than the fact that she actually committed the sin of adultery by herself, I mean almost willingly. Definitely she had, and she has, of course, she possesses the responsibility of hastily remarrying Claudius. That will never actually take away the guilt from her shoulder, but then again the fact that she remains innocent on certain counts as well. But this conversation is important. It is also important in another theoretical way, I mean also from the theoretical perspective, because we talk about this Oedipal complex and the Oedipal theory, and this part actually where we'll see that Hamlet and his mother, and there is this Oedipal point discussed, and this Hamlet's possession of his own mother, and then this initial sexual bonding, and then it has its own implication to that. And we will also see how we can actually discuss this part from a Freudian perspective of the Freudian perception, Freudian theoretical perspective of Oedipal complex. Then again we will also see other things. I'm not going to read it out to you right now. I'll actually put another lecture from this part, from Act 3, Scene 4 onwards. I'll put 2 more lectures on Hamlet, and we'll probably inshallah finish by the next 2 lectures, maybe by with 2 more lectures. I would like to request you to finish by yourself, read it by yourselves. I'll put up my assignments, I mean your assignments, writing assignments, home assignments, because you are all sitting at home, probably definitely are not wasting your time, will definitely read. You must be reading, and you must be taking your own preparations. Don't wait for things. Maybe things are all a little silent at the moment at home, but then again don't stay away from your own responsibility of studying by yourselves. It's a very wonderful time to study by yourselves, and then as soon as the university opens, I'm sure the time will eventually be given to the preparation for exams. So what I will do, I will put up By this time, I hope I will put up 2 more lectures to finish Hamlet, and then I will start Othello. In between, I think you probably have forgotten to give me any slot for Merchant of Venice, which we have actually for the adaptation, critical reading and adaptation. I'll also start talking about critical reading and adaptation as well from Merchant of Venice. I'll now keep posting audio files for you, so that you can actually I hope you can easily access the audio files and listen to them. I hope that might help, and then I will actually upload all the topics of assignments for all the students, so that you can actually distribute those, take up those assignment topics and start writing and working and studying together. Thank you very much. Stay safe and stay at home.